The Horton HO-229. During the Battle of Britain, despite managing to destroy an impressive 7 British aircraft, Nazi ace and engineer Walter Horten was still unhappy, for he had noticed that the lesser talented pilots under his command were being butchered by the dreaded British Spitfire. It was at this moment that Horten decided to finally create the futuristic fighter he had been dreaming of since the early 1930s, one he envisioned would be superior to the Spitfire in every aspect, and which he was convinced had the potential to help win the war. Origins. At the 1919 Treaty of Versailles concluding World War I, Germany was prohibited from building up a modern air force as punishment for their wartime aggression. With the pact banning most forms of powered flight, for most Germans interested in aviation, the only option available was to use gliders. It was at the Gliding Academy in Wasserkuppe, located 100 kilometers northeast of Frankfurt, where in 1931, Walter and his brothers Reimar and Wolfram entered the annual scale model glider contest for the first time. The trio swept aside all competition as they demonstrated that their all-wing glider could fly longer, higher, and further than any of their rivals, a feat repeated with the same design in 1932 and 1933, when once again they would be crowned champions. With Germany secretly rearming themselves during the 1930s, by 1936, the Horten brothers were finally given the opportunity to operate mechanized planes after all 3 of them were conscripted into the Luftwaffe. Drafted as a flight instructor at the training facility in Cologne, Reimar served under Commander Oskar Dienort, who was aware of the Horten success at Wasserkuppe. Desiring an all-wing glider of his own and willing to provide the necessary workspace and materials, Dienort asked Reimar if he could construct a flyable version of his winning prototype. With the assistance of his brother Walter, who had graduated as a trained fighter pilot, Reimar assembled 4 different Horten HO prototypes between 1936 and 1938. Their design proving so popular that it would become Reimar's full-time task to make them. Progress, however, would be temporarily put on hold following the outbreak of the Second World War in 1939, with Reimar ordered to return to flight instruction and Walter appointed as technical officer to the JG-26 fighter wing of the Luftwaffe. In the summer of 1940, following the death of his brother Wolfram in France in May, Walter would make his combat debut in a Messerschmitt Bf-109 at the Battle of Britain. But he quickly became disillusioned with the aircraft after his fellow pilots continued to be shot down in great numbers by the British Spitfire, which was easily outmatching the German planes.
Hey guys, Chris here. Just the other day I was reading about an increase in data breaches, 68% more in 2021. Imagine huge loans taken out in your name or your personal information sold to scammers. It's no joke. Even health insurance companies could raise your rates based on your online activity. That's when I found Incogni, the sponsor of today's video. It's a simple and genuine solution that contacts data brokers on my behalf, requesting my personal data removal and handling any objections they may have. I gave it a try, and it's been a breeze. All I had to do was create an account and grant Incogni the right to work for me. Incogni protects my data privacy the entire time with ongoing removals. And it doesn't stop there. Some data brokers have been charged with conspiracy to commit fraud, supplying lists of vulnerable people to scammers, but Incogni makes sure that doesn't happen to you. And here's the best bit. Incogni is available risk-free for 30 days, so you could try it out and see how easy it is to protect yourself against those cyber criminals and unethical data brokers. Want to take back control of your data? Use the link in the description below and take the first step in keeping your personal information safe and sound. The first 100 people to use the simple history code get 60% off Incogni.
Walter's theory was confirmed in August 1940 when he became the first German pilot to fly a captured Spitfire, convincing him that if Germany were to continue to employ inferior fighters, they would almost surely lose the battle in the skies, and perhaps even the entire war. Development. Certain that an all-wing aircraft could match the Spitfire, in May 1941, Walter was finally given the chance to work on it after being reassigned to the Technical Office of Inspection of Fighters, where he was to determine whether German-produced aircraft could equal the performance of the Allied fleet. It was during this time that he learned that a top-secret turbojet, which would produce more thrust than any pre-existing engine, was being assembled by the manufacturer BMW. Walter would also find out that this cutting-edge propulsion system was not going to be included in the Messerschmitt Me-262, the next generation of German fighter, which was being developed by the famous German engineer Alexander Lippisch at the German Gliding Research Institute as a replacement for the Bf-109. Anticipating that an aerodynamically efficient all-wing aircraft, combined with the experimental jet engine, could become one of the fastest flying machines to ever grace the skies, Walter initiated an unauthorized project he called Sonderkommando Unit 3. The project's goal was to rival the officially sanctioned Messerschmitt Me-262 program. Using his senior position to not only hire his brother Reymar, he also hid the project's existence from the Luftwaffe by requesting that it be made top secret. Walter was well aware that court-martial or even execution would swiftly follow if it was discovered that the Hortons were squandering Air Force resources. With a team of carpenters and engineers also keeping quiet, Walter and Reymar got to work on the H-09 at the Luftwaffe station at Göttingen as the first test flight of the Messerschmitt Me-262 was being prepared. In August 1941, they saw their competition in action after witnessing Alexander Lippish's DFS-194 liquid-fueled rocket plane fly at an astounding 999 kilometers per hour. Despite this impressive performance and the news that the Messerschmitt Me-262 had been approved for production a few days later, the Hortons remained unperturbed and confident that an all-wing Horton HO equipped with a turbojet instead of a liquid-fueled rocket engine could easily break the 1,000 km per hour speed barrier. With work carried out in secrecy throughout the next 2 years, Walter and Reymar were finally able to reveal their plans after Hitler's second-in-command, Hermann Goering, disappointed with the Luftwaffe's staggering losses, proclaimed in early 1943 that he was to award 500,000 Reichsmarks to any engineer who could create an aircraft capable of carrying a 1,000-kilogram bomb at 1,000 kilometers per hour to a distance of 1,000 kilometers. Making sure not to include photos of the unofficial H-09 in the carefully drafted proposal, the Hortons all-wing concept piqued the interest of Goering, who requested that the first prototype be ready in 6 months after the meeting with the brothers in August 1943. Establishing their own official company named the Horten Flugzeugbau GmbH on February 28, 1944, the Horten brothers saw test pilot Heinz Schodenauer fly the H-09 version 1, a model built without turbojets, for the first time without incident. However, following his own assessment, Walter identified the need for a stabilizing vertical fin after the aircraft performed a number of dangerous rolls in the air. Time and budget constraints, though, meant that this feature was never added. Following an Allied bomb raid that only just missed their workshop in Göttingen by 800 meters, the Hortons transferred their base of operations to Minden to finish off the jet-powered H-09 version 2, which was to debut later that year. The result was a bizarre-looking plane structure with a steel tubular framework and fabricated with plywood coverings, possessing a takeoff weight of 8,500 kilograms at a length of 7.465 meters and a height of 2.81 meters, and an impressive set of wings with a span of 16.76 meters and an area of 52 square meters. Built without a fuselage or an empennage, its body resembled a giant wing, with the only protrusions being the pilot's canopy and the exhaust ducts above. With BMW failing to provide their turbojet engine, the H-09 was installed instead with twin UMO 004 engines, each providing 900 kilograms of thrust, and was to be armed with a 30mm cannon and 2 1,000-kilogram bombs when it entered the battlefield. Testing. Following a successful 30-minute flight on December 18, 1944, Walter and Reymar's focus was suddenly redirected away from the Horton HO for many months after they were asked by Colonel Siegfried Knemeyer, the Air Ministry Technical Director, to draw up blueprints for a turbojet bomber known as the America Bomber, as part of Hitler's failed scheme to drop an atomic bomb on New York City. With the brothers too busy with this top-secret assignment, the second round of flight evaluations was delayed until February 1945. When Walter and Reymar permitted Erwin Ziller to conduct a series of high-speed taxi runs. After accelerating the H-09, Ziller realized he was traveling too fast and that he was going to collide into the barriers at the end of the runway, prompting him to lift the H-09 into the air to avoid being hit. Almost immediately, one of the UMO engines malfunctioned, and Ziller was forced to make an emergency landing. Extending the landing gear, the finless H-09 began to violently rock from side to side and to approach the runway at a dangerously low altitude. With the H-09 just inches from the ground, the landing gear suddenly struck a disused railway embankment located inconveniently on the runway, causing the craft to crash and slide. Suddenly, it started to veer to the left, where it smashed into a line of trees, killing Erwin Ziller and destroying the Horten brothers' only working H-09 prototype. Regretting the fact that they hadn't added a stabilizing vertical fin, Walter and Raymar were devastated, and with the end of the war in sight, it was too late to build another one. However, despite the unfortunate accident, the Luftwaffe was so desperate for a better fighter that the prototype was approved for full-scale production in the same month and redesignated as the HO229A-1, with manufacturers Klemm and Gotha ordered to assemble a batch of 93 units, which were set to be flown by a new squadron of the Luftwaffe called the JG-400. In April 1945, however, following the capture of the Gotha workshops by the U.S. Army, the HO229 and its many planned variants, including bomber and reconnaissance versions, were permanently discontinued as Allied forces marched on Berlin. Finishing with a top speed of 950 kilometers per hour, the Hortons were never able to exceed the 1,000 mark. After the end of the war, a captured Horton HO229 version 3 was transferred to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in Dayton, Ohio, where plans to finish the aircraft were abandoned in the 1950s. The Horton's brainchild, however, was not completely forgotten, for its unusual shape was found to possess impressive radar-deflecting qualities, and in an ironic twist, this Nazi innovation, later assimilated into the Northrop B-2 Spirit bomber, would unwittingly kickstart the American stealth plane revolution of the late 20th century and transform the U.S. into the world's leading air power.
Thanks to Incogni for sponsoring this video.